ladies and gentlemen, here we are again with another excerpt of the Scouser and the Scot.
Today we have someone who I've seen back in '94, so I think we're showing a bit of our ages here, which I do apologise, but we have today Myke Gray. Myke, how are you doing? How are you keeping? Hope you're keeping well.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I mean, like all of us, we're living through very difficult times, but the strong will survive.
Definitely, definitely. So let's get into all the questions. Let's find out a little bit what's happening with Myke Gray, past, present, and future. So, Myke, let's start it off right from the beginning. Can you give us a bit of a background into your introduction to music? What kind of music you listen to, and what piqued your interest?
Well, I mean, as far as I can always remember, I kind of liked music, but I grew up, in the era of punk music, and we all have our thing that attracts us to music. And for me, it was the anger of Sex Pistols, bands like The Clash. I think I was like 10 years of age. And I remember hearing punk music, mainly because my older sister was playing it. And it was the first music where I kind of like, oh, wow, I really like this. Like the introduction of Pretty Vacant. And I remember getting a guitar, which was like a little, I think it was a Gibson Marauder copy. And I remember playing guitar and learning sort of bar chords and getting into punk stuff. But the way that I got into rock music, and it was like an epiphanal moment, and I have said this on a few other interviews, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. My brother had a friend whose name was Johnny, and Johnny he actually stabbed someone to death once in a car park, and directly from stabbing someone to death, he came to my house and was looking for my brother. And I remember playing with him, like you do, like 9, 10 years of age. And Johnny was there, and we were just messing around. And he goes, okay, well, I'll come back later. And then we found out like 2 days later in the newspaper that he'd come directly from stabbing someone. Now, Johnny is responsible for selling a box of cassettes to my stepfather for £10. I don't know where he got these cassettes from, but they were purchased. And I was kind of obsessed with music, and me being the obsessive compulsive person that I am, I just systematically went through these cassettes and was just listening to everything that was on it, just as a music fan, and there was all these bands I'd never heard of: Pink Floyd, Genesis, Yes. And I was just kind of listening to them going, yeah, it's not the Sex Pistols, no, yeah. And gradually I got to this one cassette, and I thought they were like foreign bands because I didn't recognize the names. And one was called Montrose and the other one was called Van Halen. And so I was thinking that they were, maybe they were from Europe. And I remember putting on the Van Halen one, and it absolutely changed my life. Like skies parted, angels were singing. And I just remember listening to this thing, and instantly my life was mapped out in front of me, because whatever I was hearing was completely different to the Sex Pistols or the Clash or whatever. And it was just something different. And to this day, I consider it the greatest rock music I've ever heard, the greatest guitar player that I've ever heard. And if I hadn't have heard that cassette, I think my life would have been very different, because it completely galvanized I was like, I have to know what this is. And then I scoured all the magazines. I remember like Sounds, and what is Van Halen? Who is Van Halen? And my life just changed just there and then. So the quick answer to your question is Van Halen and the Sex Pistols, but that's the long answer.
So beyond Van Halen and the Sex Pistols, so who would your other, right, let's look at it more from being a guitarist, a performer, etc. So is there anybody else that once you found Van Halen, is there anybody since then that you would bolt onto that's kind of made you think, that's amazing, I want a piece of that? Is there anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with music. I mean, I wake up in the morning thinking about music, and I go to bed thinking about the music I'm going to do the next day. And once I'm on something, then it's just a level of obsession which drives most people insane. So once I discovered that there was this other type of guitar playing, where you've got the Sex Pistols and it's all kind of punky and there's no intricacy or anything like that, and it's quite. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's fairly one-dimensional compared to the world of Jimmy Page, compared to the world of Tony Iommi. And all of a sudden, once I discovered that there was this other type of rock music, I just went berserk. And the big three for me would be Randy Rhoads, Michael Schenker, and Eddie Van Halen. If you said to me, who are your three favorite guitar players, it would be those. But, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know, there's so many. I love guitar playing. It could be The Edge. It could be Rory Gallagher. It could be, I'm just obsessed with music. So I find most music interesting, but I love them all. Brian May, Nuno Bettencourt, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, John Sykes, all at different points. They're huge influences to me. But a massive moment in my life was Bernie Tormey. Because my sister was involved in the music industry, she got to know the tour manager for Bernie Tormey, and she said to him, "Oh, my brother plays guitar," and Sean, his name was, spoke to Bernie, and so Bernie came round to my house, and I think I was 12 or 13 years of age, and so I could play, but not properly or anything. And so I'll never forget, I'm just sitting in my bedroom, which is in a council estate. And my sister goes, "Oh, Bernie's here, he's coming up." And I just saw this huge mane of blonde hair. And Bernie was very tall. And he came into my bedroom and he had black and red striped trousers and winkle picker boots and this velvet jacket. And he'd just come off of tour with Ozzy Osbourne. And he sort of said, "I hear you're a guitar player." And he spent like 3 hours in my bedroom. And I had a little 5-watt practice amp, and he had this little Les Paul copy, and he would just pick up a guitar and he'd play it and such and such. And this went on for about 3 hours. And he taught me how to hammer on and how to hit harmonics and all that sort of stuff. And then at the end of it, he said, "Well, would you like to come down to rehearsal?" And I'm 12 years of age, 13 years of age. And I said, "Yeah, of course." He goes, "Okay, we'll sort it out." And then I'm just sitting, waiting by the phone, thinking, "Oh, maybe this is never going to happen." And then about 4 weeks later, I got the message, which was like, "Yeah, come down to rehearsal." And it was in a place called Lots Road, which is in Chelsea. And so I go down there and, I walked into this room. At this point, I've never been to a concert, so all I used to is sitting in my bedroom playing my guitar. And I walk into this rehearsal room and there's Bernie, and there's Frank Noon on drums with a huge double bass drum kit. And Frank was the original player of Def Leppard, great player. He had Everton Williams on. I didn't even know what a bass player was. Everton Williams on bass. And I'm going in, and there's this level of noise that's coming at me. And they tell me to sit down and sit down there. And so I'm watching them rehearsal. So I get to see a real band rehearsing. And then at the end of the set, they go, "Well, now it's your turn." And so they had this other little Marshall set up, and we plugged in. And they told me to learn Under My Wheels by Alice Cooper. And they said, "Well, away you go." And so I start jamming with the band, and we're playing this song, and we play it 2 or 3 times. And then this pattern would evolve where they would play the set, and then I would get up and play on the last song. At the time, I just thought that was the way it went. What I didn't realize was that they were preparing me for a show. And they said, "Would you like to get up and play at the London Marquee?" And Under My Wheels was the encore. So they were structuring the rehearsal so that I got used to getting up and playing. So my first gig at 13 was in front of 800 people at the London Marquee. Never been to a gig, let alone played at a gig. And I don't know if you remember the old Marquee stage. It's like the dressing room was behind the stage, and you open the door and then there's 800 people standing there. And so that, in terms of like pivotal moments in my life, obviously once you've done something like that at the age of 13, there's no going back.
Yeah.
And so that was the real catalyst to my life as a musician.
That's cool. It's really cool.
That is pretty epic. That's a story that you can't beat or top.
No,
So
there's no top
you as a
trumpet that.
songwriter, who do you think have key ingredients for writing a great song? And what are the key ingredients for writing a great song?
I mean, when I started playing music, all I was really interested in was guitar solos. You know, I wanted to be able to play Into the Arena. I wanted to be able to play Mr. Crowley. And so at the beginning, a song was just something that got to the guitar solo. You know, that's how I kind of saw songs. It was like, yeah, okay, what's the guitar solo? And then the process of suddenly realizing I actually need a band. You know, if I'm I need songs and and I had no idea how to write a song at all. You know, so at the beginning, you just start piecing other people's songs together and you take a bit from there and you put it together. But over the years, my shift of importance obviously changed dramatically, and I'm known, you know, I'm known more as a songwriter, I guess, than a lead guitar player. But there was some pivotal moments. You know, I spent years trying to write songs and not really knowing how to do it. And then I got asked to play guitar for UFO. Now, UFO was like one of my favorite bands, and Michael Schenker was one of my favorite guitar players. So when the phone call came, it wasn't going to be something that I was going to say no to. It was like, of course. And so I get told to learn these songs, and I knew a lot of them anyway, like Lights Out, Doctor Doctor, and Rock Bottom. And I was told to go to a rehearsal room, which was in Woolwich, which was complete opposite side of London. And it was this huge aircraft hangar, you know. I was kind of like, Jesus Christ, you know, it's huge. And it was where Deep Purple used to do all their pre-production, and Judas Priest and Bon Jovi. And it was a company called Tasco. And this was where we were rehearsing. Now, at the start of the day, it was just me, the drummer, and the bass player, and we were going through the songs, and it all sounded great and everything. And then in the afternoon, Phil Mogg turned up. Now, I'd worked with a number of singers beforehand, but when you stand next to Phil Mogg and you hear him sing, you suddenly realize, I've not worked with any singers before. This is the first singer I've ever worked with. And it would be hard to put into words the resonancy of his voice. And it just sends chills up you. When you hear him singing Lights Out, like 3 foot away from you, sounding exactly like the record. And then, so this was a huge change, because all of a sudden the importance of the song became more important than the solo. And it was working with Phil and seeing how Phil wrote songs and how he approached his approach to writing songs was radically different to anything that I'd even perceived. You know, he talked about the song as a story. He talked about characters within the song. He talked about, well, what's the emotion that we're trying to get across? And even though I didn't work with him for very, very long, I worked with him long enough to know that I had to completely rethink how I approach songwriting. So in answer to your question, my premise or my foundation is, what kind of emotion am I trying to elicit from the person who's listening? Because ultimately that's what a song is. I'm trying to create something that is emotionally going to get into somebody's head, that they're going to want to sing along, listen to it again, make them happy, make them sad, whatever. It's got very little to do with notes, you know. It's to do with what gets into the subconscious of a love of music. How can I get in there? So that was the fundamental change, and I've spent a lifetime trying to do it.
I think I once, I don't know whether it was, I think it was a phase in social media when you were coming out, you were putting up old songs, you were giving a kind of backstory to it. And I don't know if it was Tower of Strength, but it was something about, at the time you were listening to soul music or something. Is that right? Yeah, and you said that you took stuff out of soul music
Well, I mean, you know, once I discovered that songwriting was the most important component, it's the currency of the music industry when you think about it. Everything is built off of the songs. I then went about learning all of the great songs. There was a period of time, you know, I learned all the Beatles songs, even the ones I didn't like. I learned all of the Rolling Stones songs, all the ABBA songs, all the Queen songs, you know, deconstructing them. So I am an incredibly obsessive human being. But there was a Motown phase where it was just kind of like, I started to listen to the Jacksons and Marvin Gaye and realized that there was, the way that they structured their music was very different to rock music. You know, within rock music, the guitar is the foundation, but within Motown music, it's the bass. You know, started to suddenly realize that the songs were built up from the bass up and the rhythm up. And the emphasis was on the melody and the lyric, and the guitar is, you know, non-existent within Motown music. So I learned all of the Motown music, and Tower of Strength came from that period of learning. You know, I was getting all of these influences, and what I tried to do was marry up Motown music with classic rock music. I was also a big fan of The Who. And so Tower of Strength is very much me trying to link The Who with Motown. That was my idea.
Yeah, I remember reading it and thinking, I like that, because I've been working with a couple of really young bands, and I was like, look, guys, don't just listen to your genre. Here's what Myke said. And I remember sending it to them. I said, you need to learn it. And Ian knows all that as well. You're talking there about obviously standing next to Phil Mogg, and I think most of us would like to kill for that position. But you've worked with some fantastic singers over the years. Now, I know that you're now doing the vocals on the Shades of Grey. So can we talk about what it is, like the singers that you've worked with that's really resonated with you, what it was about their voices? Because I'm very much driven vocally, you know, vocals and melody is what I love. That's what I listen to in music more than anything.
I mean, me too. I mean, the experience with Phil was like a reset. It was like, to be honest with you, it actually goes before that. I used to, when I was about 15 or 16, I lived right next to the Hammersmith Odeon. Well, within, you know, walking distance. And I used to sneak into sound checks. And I don't know if you remember the Hammersmith Odeon, but it was split into 2 levels. And I used to hide at the top because I was quite small. And then I used to like just watch the sound checks. And I creeped into a Dio sound check. And it was on the first album, the Holy Diver tour. And I remember sort of creeping in, and up until that point, I was guitar crazy. You know, it was all about the guitars. And I'd initially gone down there to hear Vivian Campbell, you know, because I thought he was amazing. And then I just remember the sound check, and they did Neon Nights at the sound check. And I just remember almost my heart exploding through my chest, because it was the first time I'd heard probably the greatest rock singer in the world projecting. And I wasn't looking at the guitar player. I was just watching Ronnie James Dio. And for a 15-year-old kid or 16-year-old, it was a bit confusing, because it was like, how is it that I'm no longer listening to the guitar player? I was just listening to this voice. And it dawned on me right there and then that if I was going to do anything within music, I'd have to have singers of this standard to do it. So Phil, hearing Ronnie James Dio at close proximity was a big moment. Then obviously working with Phil was a big one. And then I saw a video of Neville MacDonald, and he was singing in a band called Cougar. But unbeknownst to me, there used to be a club in Wardour Street called the St. Moritz. And if you played at the Marquee, then all the musicians used to hang out in the St. Moritz. And there was like a little stage in there, and you'd be playing. And I got asked to get up and jam. And so we were playing some songs. And then all of a sudden, this guy gets pushed up to the front, and he was going to like, oh, this guy is going to sing. And I didn't know who he was, but okay, it's just a jam. and it was Neville McDonald, and we started to play Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. And so I was just playing along, and then of course this voice comes out, and it's kind of like what? And I just remember my like jaw dropping. It was just kind of like, this is it. This is the voice. And so we were playing the song. Then all of a sudden, someone walks across the room and basically goes, if you're going to play my father's songs, you're going to have to play them right. And he got behind the drum kit, and it was Jason Bonham. And so in the St. Moritz, there's Nev singing, there's me playing guitar, and there's Jason Bonham on drums, and we're playing Led Zeppelin songs. And then we stopped, and this person went, and I didn't know who he was. And I was like, who was that guy? Who was that? And I couldn't find out. And then someone handed me a videotape of Cougar, which was his band, and they were singing the song. And I was like, it's him. I've got to find out who he is. And so I contacted him to see if he wanted to form a band, being me. And he declined because Cougar was his band. And then Jagged Edge formed, and I worked with Matty. But Neville was always like my first choice. And then when Jagged Edge fell apart, his band was also falling apart, and that's how Skin was formed. So obviously Neville, I would say, is the best singer I've ever worked with, and that is up against a lot of good singers. And for many reasons. One, I mean, how can I put this into words? You know, the guy he's like a Ronaldo of singing. You know, he's just someone who's scored a hat-trick every night. In my entire time of working with him, he never sought one line of praise. It wasn't needed. It was someone who always questioned everything he did. Was it any good? Was it good enough? Always sung in tune. Just, like I always compare music and football. There's a lot of similarities. You put Nev in front of 100,000 people, he'll kill them. You know, it's like he's someone who never shied away from the big stage and only got better. When he was singing vocals in the studio, it was more which line is the best line rather than that line is no good. Always delivered 100% and was just the ultimate professional. So from those regards, I don't think he could be ever beaten as a singer. Matty Alfonsetti is a phenomenal singer, especially in the studio, but could never do what Nev did live. He was always much more comfortable in the studio. He would normally get everything within 1 or 2 takes. I mean, that fast. Like 4 takes would be like, forget it. If he didn't get it, I mean, I did a song called A Little Too Late, which is on the Red, White and Blues album. That's from beginning to end in one go. And the first go, done. Like Neville in the studio would be different. Nev on his first 3 or 4 goes would maybe give you 50%. And then by the time he got to 8 or 9, he's taken it somewhere where very few singers could ever go. But Matty would normally give you everything within 1 or 2. And then from that point on would never get any better. So those are the 2 big differences. They're phenomenal. Bruce Dickinson, I mean, that's I remember rehearsing with Bruce Dickinson and just being overwhelmed by the level of power and intensity that comes out. If you're talking about intensity, then Bruce stands alone, you know, because it's just like a fucking monster just ripping it apart, and it's just like full on. Nev would be more considered, technically a much better singer. So if you said to me which one's the best, I would always pick Nev. But if you just wanted someone to lead an army into battle, you know, Bruce would be hard pushed to beat as well.
So how much does that daunt you when you hear your own voice now? You know, you've got all these voices in your head. You know, I mean, like the different ones you work with. So you go forward, you're a songwriter, you're a guitarist, now you're doing vocals. I mean,
Well, I always write for the singer, so I write, when you've got someone that can do what Nev can do, then it opens up your parameters of what is capable. When I'm writing for myself, it's within the boundaries of what I can do. I would never try to sing Tower of Strength because it's beyond what I can do as a singer, but doesn't stop Vince Neil. It doesn't, just because you're not Nev, it doesn't mean that you can't create a piece of music that is going to resonate with someone, so I focus on what I can do. I mean, and you're right, when the singers that you've worked with are Bruce Dickinson, Neville McDonald, Matty Alfonsetti, Phil Mogg, Chris Thompson, I've worked with a lot of great singers. And so that would make it very daunting to have a go yourself. Now, subsequently, I've worked with a lot of bad singers, and average singers, and I'm a producer. So for the first part of my career, I was used to singers getting something right within a few goes and it being world class. Then when I got into the realms of being a session guitar player and producer, I realized that sometimes it took someone 100 goes to get it right. And I've spent years of my life editing vocals together, where I'm taking one word from this line and 3 words from that line and taking this from there and that and constructing a lead vocal. I was working just last year with a singer, and on one of the songs, they sung the song 100 times. And every single line from that song was sung from a different take, sometimes a different day, sometimes a different month. And of course, you listen to it back and you sort of go, oh, isn't that a fantastic singer? It's actually taken me maybe 6 weeks to construct that lead vocal. And then I would bring in singers to do backing vocals. And once again, you've got them to sing it 50 times and you go, there's just nothing here. So what I would go in is start and do it myself. So I worked up from doing backing vocals, and that gave me the confidence, because initially I thought everyone's going to think these backing vocals are rubbish, but no one seemed to mention them. So I thought, oh, maybe I've got away with being able to do some backing vocals. And then after doing that for a few years, that's when I did I Get Up by Shades of Grey. I just thought I'll just do it myself, and maybe just because I got bored of waiting for someone. So I just thought I'll just do it myself. And then I thought everyone would just laugh at it or ignore it or whatever, but no one, it got quite well received. And then for all of last year, I've just actually been focusing on trying to improve my singing, and my guitar playing has taken a bit of a back seat. Another long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right, because it's interesting. It's the kind of stuff that people that watch this program or this interview need to know about. The tricks of the trade and the experiences. So it's great, but it's it's really interesting, mate.
So going back to gear, because I enjoy my gear. I am a little guitaraholic, as John will know. First seen you 94 when you done the Donington stage. My first Monsters of Rock, I think you played Skin on that stage. I think it was either before or after Biohazard, who had the power pull.
Yeah, we were on after Biohazard.
Yeah, because they had the power pulled on halfway through the set, if you remember rightly. Yeah. Quick question on this one then, Mike. How do you vary your gear? So obviously you're playing an outdoor festival in front of, I think it was about 60 to 80,000 people, and then you play a normal club. What is your rig setup? Can you talk us through it?
I mean, through the years, I've tended, and I still use Marshalls.
Yeah.
I've always had them. I've always liked them. If I'm completely honest with you, I've never been someone who's liked my guitar. I've always liked other people's guitar sound more than my own. In a festival situation, it's very chaotic. You don't get sound checks. And in the case of like at that particular day, you know, you're in your little dressing room, you're relying upon your crew to set the gear up, and then you walk out onto a stage, you don't know what you're going to hear. So the first couple of songs, it's a little bit of a panic. You know, the first thing that normally comes up is, can I hear my microphone? So you're kind of sorting out your mic, and so you're giving signals to the monitor engineer, and then you realize, okay, well, what does my actual guitar sound like? And then you realize I can't actually hear that either. So it's always a bit of a panic in the live situation, but I've always used Marshalls because they've never really let me down. In the studio, I use a Kemper.
Just got to say, I've seen that in the background, like, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the life-changing thing for me, you know, because, you know, getting a guitar sound in the studio is tough, you know, because you've got all of these variants. You don't know if the studio's got any good mics. You don't know what the cables are like. You don't know what the desk is like. You know, when I recorded the album, the guitars for this first Skin album, that was like you know, like a new world, because we had a guy called Shay Baby who was the engineer, and you know, his life was getting guitar sounds, you know, and so it was the first time that I'd seen someone going through every lead, checking every lead to see what it sounded like, and then you suddenly realize this lead actually does sound better than the other lead. He's like, why is that? And I'd explain it's the cabling, you know, and then we would go different mics, you know, and you realize, oh yeah, that does sound different. And then even the placement of the mic on the speaker, and he would do this thing called shaving, where he'd have these headphones on with a mic, and he'd be like moving the mic millimeters, and the guitar would be on full, and he would say to me, whatever you do, do not play a note. And so he would be catching, you know, because he would deafen him basically, because he was right in front of a cabinet with a microphone which is plugged in, picking up this air pressure. And then he would go, right, that's it. He'd gaffer tape it down, and then that would be the mic, and that would be the cable, and that would never change, you know. And so you've got someone who's then specializing in that, and then you realize that everything you did before was just amateur. And so the miking up of speakers is an art form, you know, and it can change massively. And in my particular situation, I don't have that sort of kind of time. So a Kemper, just basically, you've got it all. It's just there. You just plug it in. 3 months later, when I need to redo something, I can just go bang, bang, and it's the exact same guitar sound. You know, so from that perspective, it's the greatest invention in the world. And I'm very lucky to have some producers who send me their profiles.
Would you ever play it live?
I'm so scared of taking it out of the house. I would if I had 2 of them, and my friend Andy Sneap, that he uses them live. So I know that they do, but I do like the air pressure that comes out of Marshalls. And so I would be, when you play a Kemper, it does change the way you play. You know, you have to adjust how you play because of latency, and it just feels different. You know, when you're playing through a Marshall and it's coming behind you, not only is it the sound, it changes you as a person, you know, and you become that person on stage, because the person I'm on stage is very different to who I am, you know, in my day, and the sound of it does sort of play a part.
That's cool. So let's talk about guitar. I mean, you were talking there earlier about you're now focusing a lot on singing. If you're talking here to new young guitarists, for example, how often do you practice guitar in a normal? Let's say you're going up to do an album, or you're going to go on tour or do a big gig. How often do you practice the guitar? What things do you run through, etc.? Any advice you can give on that?
Well, I mean, at the moment, you'd be amazed at how little I play. I mean, I sometimes go maybe 6 weeks without picking up a guitar, because I do everything, you know, writing the lyrics, I'm doing the production, I'm doing the singing, I'm doing the songwriting, editing, you know, it can take up a huge amount of your time. And then all of a sudden I've got to go, oh shit, I've got to do a guitar solo. So it will take me maybe 2 or 3 days to build up speed to be able to do something half decent. When I was doing my solo album, which is all instrumentals, that was the best guitar playing I've ever played, because I was playing like 8-10 hours a day. If I have a tour coming up, then I have a very strict regime of practice. So I would do I'd start my quarter notes on 100, you know what I mean when I say that, 120 BPM. So it's like a quarter note is when you're playing in fours and you're playing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I start that at 120 BPM, and my triplets would be at 100 BPM, like 3 notes. And so I would practice. If I'm starting at 120, then by the end of maybe 2 weeks, I'll be up to 150 BPM, and then my triplets would be up to about 130 BPM. But I have incredibly strict protocols of what I run through to get up to that speed. It's nothing musical. It's just pure technique of just going through all these various scales. And I will play maybe 6 to 8 hours a day, just going through these things, getting back up to that level of technique. You know, because if you're playing, I don't know how familiar you are with Skin songs, you know, but if you're playing like the solo in Night Song, it's a very, very hard thing to play. You know, it is, so you have to be at the top of your game. So I normally allow myself 2 weeks of 6 to 8 hours a day to get me back to somewhere halfway decent, you know.
Jeez. Now I know why I was never a guitarist. God, even the idea would be enough. Like, we were interviewing Nathan James the other day, and we were talking about vocal exercises for him, and some of the stuff he was running through and telling us was just unbelievable. You know, the things that you know, because he takes it so seriously. But it's cool. But that, you're the only other person I've ever heard with that kind of focus on.
Well, I mean, like, if the first thing I do is like, I mean, it's not plugged in, but the first thing I do, I don't even use my right hand. Initially, I work all the way up the neck, every string, and then I just do downstroke. I wish I was plugged in so you could hear what I'm doing. Then I just practice, and all of this would be done to a click track, and then gradually working my way up. And then there's just everything done on one string. I go all the way up every string, and then I start doing combinations of 2 strings, and then 3 strings, and then you get into sweeping arpeggios, and it's just very, very strict. I don't sort of go sit there going,
Yeah.
You know, that sort of like real guitar playing. You know, this is just like precision. It's just playing to a click track, getting everything precise. So that when you do go to play all that stuff, it's just effortless. You don't think about it. I mean,
it's almost like what you were talking about with your football analogies. It's like Beckham going out and practicing for an hour every day just in free kicks.
Yeah, I mean, I've done martial arts since the age of 18, and the philosophy is you train harder than the fight. You know, so it's the same thing with guitar playing. And the other thing, when you're playing live, you always play everything faster. So you have to learn to play all of the things faster to match the adrenaline of when you're playing live. So,
quick question. Obviously, you practice quite a lot when you're trying to get up to that certain level. So it's show day. What is your routine show day then? Do you warm up prior to the gig? What do you do? Vocally warm up? Do you do hand warm ups for your guitar playing? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, whenever my personality, if I had to describe it, would be, imagine Roy Keane on the day of a cup final. That's how I approach music every single day. It's that level of seriousness. So I was in Skin, you had 4 people who basically had the same mindset. And so from the moment I wake up in the morning, it's about the preparation for the gig. I don't really want anyone to talk to me on the day of the gig because it just distracts me from what, you know, even though I'm quite a friendly person, it's like, if you start talking to me about how are you? It's kind of like, why are you breaking my train of thought? You know, so the people who know me well, it's just kind of, I just want to focus on this. So the preparation begins from the moment my eyes wake up. There's a lot of practice. I mean, Neville was phenomenal. That's the other thing why he was amazing. You know, never drank on tour, always made sure that he was hydrated with water, wouldn't really speak until about 4 o'clock. Then he'd start to talk, he'd do his initial warm-ups, then sound check would come, he'd do the sound check, and then about an hour before the gig, he'd be starting his preparation, and then he'd walk out on stage, and it would be like that day after day after day. You know, on Skin, we were doing 5-6 shows a week, and it would be that level, like 2-hour shows. Phenomenal preparation. I've never worked with any musician with that degree of discipline, but the whole band was like it. And so one of the things I'll never forget is when Red, White and Blues was supporting Chickenfoot. We were very lucky to support Chickenfoot. And our first show, I think it was in Manchester. And we turned up to sound check, and Kenny Aronoff was playing drums for them on that tour. And he was on stage doing all of his stuff, and it was just like amazing. And then they finished sound check, and I heard him go into the dressing room, and he had a drum kit out there, electronic kit, and he was literally playing drums in his dressing room till the moment that they went showtime. And then they went downstairs, they did their gig, and I was like, my God, this guy has literally been playing drums from 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we come off stage, they came off stage, and to my absolute astonishment, I heard the drum kit start going up again. And he started to practice things, apparently, that he thought he did wrong in the show. And it's kind of like, Jesus Christ, that was a level of like commitment to practicing that I'd never seen before. You know, and it's just the same thing. Like the more you practice, the better you get. So I think some musicians are just born with like an obsessional personality. I've also known certain musicians who they just pick up a guitar and they play, and then they never do anything again. I was always shocked, you know. I mean, Dickie Pleaser, he used to, you know, do preparation all day long. He'd be doing all of his rudiments before he goes on stage. And then I see some people in the bar having a pint before they go on. It's just kind of like, wow, it's just a different mentality, you know, because of my nature of martial arts, and it's all about discipline. And within the nature of my work, the people who I know to be the most successful are the most disciplined. And
one of the things I picked up on, Mike, and I'd just like you to talk about this, because I know a lot of guitarists, young guitarists, that when they practice, they don't use click tracks. How important do you think they have to, don't they? They really have to get on the ball, I think.
I mean, for me, the click track is vital. I mean, if you said to me what was the biggest mistake that I ever made, is that I didn't use a click track at the beginning. It was only when I went in to record with a proper producer. The first proper producer I worked with was Chris Tangarides. And he was the first person who pointed out to me that I was going in and out of time. And I didn't even realize, you know, and as soon as a weakness is pointed out to me, then it becomes an obsession for it to become a strength. So now I do practice without a click, just to know that I can do it. But I would say that 95% of my practicing is done with a click track.
Cool. I'm glad you think that, because as I say, I know a lot of young ones and they just don't do it. And I'm like, guys, in fact, Ian, you've had that conversation with some as well about using click tracks or a metro or whatever the hell it is, as long as they need to know their timings right, or don't they?
I
Well,
think that it's not just guitarists though. I think realistically, it's like, you know, drums, bass. Everyone needs to make sure that they can play through that clip
well, I
and
mean,
play,
when
play
I
along.
left, when Skin split up and I became a session musician, and then the need to be able to have good timing became even more crucial because like Skin was my band, Jagged Edge was my band, so I'm running it. So I always had a little bit of leeway of what I could and couldn't do. But once you're going, I remember doing a session for Roger Sanchez, who was a DJ, like a dance DJ, quite big for a while. And I walked into the studio, and his opening words were to me was, "You've got two goes to get this right. No hello, no nothing. You've got two goes to get this right." And it's like, whoa, okay, you know. So and that's the level of pressure that you were under. I remember I was doing a session for Keith Olsen for Bruce Dickinson, and he handed me a piece of paper which was a manuscript, and he said, "I want you to play this." Which was me basically accompanying a violin part. Now, a violin part is very different to a guitar because of the way that it's situated on the neck. And I looked and I sort of said, "Keith, this is going to be tough." I said, "This is going to take a little bit of practice." He goes, "I know, that's why you've got it today, but I want you to do it tomorrow. And if you can't do it tomorrow, then George Lynch will." And when you get into the realms of that level, there's no margin for error. So being able to play with a click and in time will be the deciding factor on whether you can cut it as a session musician.
That's cool. Yeah, that's good.
So going back to you personally, Myke, what is your biggest pleasure about being a musician? And are there any downsides to it?
I'm struggling to find a pleasure about being a musician. I actually, for me, it's incredibly, the music industry is very stressful. The time that I'm actually just happiest is when I'm just holding a guitar, writing songs. That's when I'm kind of like just in my own little world, creating these songs, because, you know, for me to, I don't know where they come from. You know, you sort of go through a period where you almost go into a different state of mind. I can't just pick up a guitar and go, "Now here's a song." You know, you have to go through this process where certain doors in your mind open up, and all of a sudden a level of creativity manifests, which is very hard to manifest when real life is going on. So I have to spend a lot of time by myself in order for these things to come. But the organization of musicians, getting people to play your song, trying to get journalists, running the financial side of a band, videos, editing, these are all things which are just constantly stressful, which I get very little pleasure from. It's normally just a sense of relief. Whenever I'm going on tour, you know, when you've been in a band with Neville McDonald and you're going out, it's a bit like playing for Manchester United or playing for Real Madrid. You know, when you've got Gareth Bale on one side and you've got Ronaldo on the other, you know that people, they're going to 100% all the time. You know, so getting people that are going to be as committed as you for long periods of time is hard, because it's relentless. You know, and I'm not someone who is ever settles for that'll be okay. It's like, unless you're going out to be the best, why bother? Because the best will just eat you alive. You know, so I've always struggled. I mean, I think I've worked with 17 musicians in the last 3 years, and it generally stems from, yes, you have to come to rehearsal. Yes, you have to be to sound check. Things to me which are fundamental. You know, the idea that someone could just come up to a gig with no rehearsal, it's kind of like, no, forget it. You know, it's unless, and so getting musicians like that on board, and so it's all levels of stress. You know, so I find it quite stressful. The joy is just writing songs for me.
So one of the things, I think one of the first things I noticed about yourself on social media in particular was you started talking about streaming sites, streaming platforms, etc. And I know you've got strong views on that. Now, I work with some young, well, some not so young bands as well, who think that everything has to be in the streaming sites because that's how they're going to get discovered, etc. Can you talk us through what your experience of it is, what your views are? Because I think it's, well, what I've read about you made me think about it differently. So I'd like you, if you could actually talk about that, please, Myke.
I mean, when you first get into music, you know, you're attracted to it because you love music. You know, I remember seeing Judas Priest on Top of the Pops. I remember seeing Van Halen, and it's just the love of music that brings you in there, and it's the thing that inspires you to spend 8 hours a day playing guitar and writing songs and rewriting stuff. It's just this absolute, and I still have it to this day. I'm just overwhelmed by music. It just blows my mind that there's this thing in the world, and it consumes my every waking thought. And then you suddenly realize, well, if you want to exist playing music, you have to get involved in this thing called the music business. Now, at its absolute core, music is built upon the thing of a musician playing something and someone in the audience going, I really like this, I want to hear it again. That is it. That is at its fundamental thing. That is the joy of music. Now, in order to make that happen, you know, initially there were no records. You had to go to a concert and people would come back again. And it was a very pure exchange. You know, probably the music venue sold beer, or they had people, they had the musician in there so that they could sell alcohol. And so then the connection becomes 3 people. You have the audience, you have the band, and then you have the person who owns the venue, who's making profit from it. And then it goes one stage further, which is like getting your songs on the radio. And then you've got to make a record. And then you've got merchandise companies. And then all of a sudden, you realize you actually have to interact with about 30 different entities, you know, just to get anywhere. Publishing companies, marketing companies, there's all of these fractions that are come off this very basic principle, which is I play something and you like hearing it. Very simple, you know. And of course, musicians, all they really want to do is play music. They don't want to look at accounts. They don't want to sit in meetings about marketing and stuff like that. They just want to go out on tour and play and do stuff like that. You know, so let's get straight right from the beginning. The music industry, the music business has always been never in the favor of the musician. You know, if you think about the very basic record deals, when we were signed, we were given an advance, and until you have recouped your advance, you don't get any more money. Now, the record companies back in the day, if we're talking about Skin Time, a record company would sell a record to a record shop for about £5. Out of that £5, the band would receive £1 at best. Out of that, your manager would take 20%, you pay your tax, and then you divide it amongst the band. But of course, you don't get any of those pounds until your album is recouped, your videos are recouped, your tour support is recouped, the cost of your artwork is recouped. You don't get anything. So the deals were never good, ever. And when people come to me and they go, oh, we'd like to license your record, I go, well, that's only going to happen if we completely restructure your perception of what a record deal is. But that's a separate discussion. So that was the basic principle. It's the reason why no bands made any money, because the record company were always making 4 times more than the band. And it was always structured in a way where the band were very unlikely to recoup. Your managers, they just want the advances, you know. So if you get 100,000 advance, they instantly take 20,000 off the top of it, and then find 100 other ways to get even more money off the top of it. And then came the streaming sites. Okay. And what that did was change the perception and change the way that people consume music. Now, people don't want to buy music. They actually just they want it for free. You know, there's ways now where you could just hook up YouTube to a Bluetooth system and you can play anything off of YouTube through a great sound system. And you don't actually have to pay for anything. So now it's come to the point where there's no income for the musicians at all, because there's no incentive for anyone to buy. So what I have done, you know, and I bought into the illusion that I'm going to give my album to iTunes, I'm going to give it to Spotify because it's going to help widen your reach. And all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of people that have never been able to hear your music are going to be able to hear it and they'll buy it from you. So I think in 2017 or 2018, I released Shades of Grey, which is my instrumental album, thinking, okay, this is how it works now. Let me tell you, I made maybe £100 in the entire year of streaming. The entire year. It didn't reach anyone. I'd be looking at the accounts and you're getting like maybe 1/10 of a penny if someone streams it. And so I just thought, well, I can't exist on this. So I now rely upon my fan base, people that have been fans of me for like 30 years, whether it be Jagged Edge, Skin, Red, White and Blues. And they just want to support me as a musician, you know, because they feel strongly enough that they want me to continue making music. And so now what I do is just make it available for a download through my website. If you want Are You Ready for Love, buy it and I'll send you the artwork and I'll send you the MP3 and you get it from me direct in a month than I will in a year through a streaming site. And that's off of one song. You know, so £100 to a musician now means a lot. You know, that's like you can pay for your food for the week, you know, but £100 a year from a streaming site, if you're lucky, forget it. And I even feel the same way about PRS. PRS is meant to be the thing that's protecting you. I look at my PRS statements and I have hundreds of songs that are published, you know, and out there. My last one, I think, was £37. It's like, this does nothing for a musician. So I realize, you know, I continue to make music purely for my fans. I know that it's an uphill battle. I know I'm not going to get featured in Classic Rock magazine. I know I'm not going to get played on Radio 1 or Radio 2 because you're not part of the infrastructure. You're on the outside. And I don't buy advertising in magazines, so they're not going to write about you. This is something that I learned in Skin. When we were in Skin and we were signed to Parlophone Records, we were in all the magazines. You know, we were on the front cover of Kerrang and, you know, we were on the front cover of Raw and we were always being interviewed and journalists would come out on tour. And then we lost our record deal with Parlophone and we got signed to Snapper. And we released a third album, Experience Electric. Released it, nothing from the magazines. It was kind of like, well, why aren't we getting featured anymore? And it's like, well, it's because we don't buy advertising. So if you don't buy the advertising, you don't get the features. It was like, and that was like, oh wow, is that how it works? At the time, we just thought that was the norm. But of course, you suddenly realize unless you've got that machine behind you, you haven't got a chance. And so I know that I'm on the peripheries, you know, and I rely completely on my fan base and things like that to spread the word. But I believe that fundamental change has to happen, and the fundamental change is the artist give it away. So for me, I think what has to happen is that the artist retains the rights to the music, or the record deals become one where the artist gets to buy back their art upon recoupment of their record. Otherwise, why not just make your own record and license it, like the Foo Fighters? That's what the Foo Fighters do. They record their own albums, and Dave Grohl licenses it to record labels and changes it every so many years. You know, that's the smart way of doing it. But the idea that a record company puts you into a studio and you hand over your art, which people may want to listen to for 50 years, like the Eagles or the Beatles, Fleetwood Mac or Queen, you take that, or you just give it to them, and if nothing happens after 6 months, your work is done, gone. I know, for instance, it's like I recently did a collaboration with Mark Pascal, who's the singer of The Departed, and we did a new version of Out in the Cold. Now, that's a song that I wrote 30 years ago, which a couple of weeks ago became #1 as the best track of the year. But I have no rights to this song. You know, I can't re-release Out in the Cold because it's not my recording. Whereas if I own the recording, I could re-release it now and maybe sell some more copies. But once you hand it over to a record company, you lose complete control of it.
What would you advise anyone, like I say, a new up and coming band? Would you say have a look into streaming, or would you say try and build your fan base up and sell it on your own personal?
You know, like rock bands have always been built upon one thing, which is their ability to reproduce it live. You know, it's the magic of rock music. It's what makes rock music so special, is that it's larger than life. The Nikki Sixxes, the Gene Simmons, the David Lee Roth, you know, it lends itself to this huge live show. And unfortunately, we're all living through hell at this moment in time. You know, so I would fundamentally resist signing anything until you knew that you had something that was worth selling. You know, everyone's very keen at the beginning. They want to become famous. They think, sign this, we'll get out there. So in the beginning, albums, so that you've at least got, I mean, imagine if you had 1,000 people work my budgets for my album. It's like I print 1,000 copies. If I can sell 1,000 copies, that's £10,000 worth of revenue. For me to do that with to get £10,000, me selling 100,000 copies is unrealistic. Selling 1,000 copies is realistic. And so it will enable me to make another record. You know, but if I hand it over to somebody else, it's highly unlikely that I'm ever going to be able to recoup that initial recording. And you're just going to go into the world of building up more and more debt, and you have no rights to your music. You know, so in the beginning, I would say build it yourself, do it through live performances. Make sure that all of your band are putting the same level of commitment into selling your band. Now, I spend my days working with hedge funds and working with private equity companies where people are getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're at their desk by 7:30 and they're still working at 10 o'clock at night. I don't know many bands that have got 5 or 4 band members that wake up in the morning and commit their day to selling their band. You're lucky if you've got 1 member doing it. You're lucky if you're very lucky if you've got 2. You know, you've got to think of your band as a business and an industry. And what have you done today to make your business better? They think that a manager's going to do that for them, but a manager, there's always going to be an element of self-interest. You know, we've all only got so many hours in the day. And do I commit my day to band A, which is out on tour making me money, or do I commit this time to band B, which is sitting at home, not really doing anything and not showing any impetus? So then it becomes another matter of who do you align yourself to? You know, your band members have to be committed as you. Your manager has to be as committed to you. You have to be as committed to your manager. I had Rod Smallwood as a manager, best manager in the world, and I saw how he worked. he was very passionate, and he lived and breathed Iron Maiden. So it's, I always say to musicians, the band members that get you into the championship aren't the band members that are going to get you into the Premiership. The band members that get you into the Champions League are not the band members that are going to win the Champions League. And if you want to be playing for Real Madrid, or you want to be playing, then you have to align yourself in all factors of your life to people that want to be playing at that level. If you're happy playing at the Championship, then great. But if you want to play in the Premiership, you're going to have some Roy Keanes.
Very true. It's all very true. Very true.
It is. Obviously, you can tell you're a bit of a United fan, but we won't go into that.
We won't hold that against you. We won't hold that against
I'm
you.
Everton anyway.
And I'm Liverpool.
So, unfortunately, as we all know, 2020 has been, let's face it, a bit of a shitstorm with COVID. Obviously, some of the key areas, and we've looked at a few different things, and one thing which stood out to myself was you have a great Patreon page, and it's a tough one to explain it to people who are starting off. What are the benefits for Patreon, and what do they get out of it? And can you give us a little insight into yours?
Well, Patreon. I was attracted to Patreon because I realized this situation was going to be going on for some time, and it just fell into the same category as I have a very loyal fan base who want to support my music, and some real people that have been listening to my music for decades, and so it all becomes about content. It's like, what are you giving people? And you can structure it in different ways. You can have a tier system where maybe someone pays £1 a month and you give them a certain level of information, and then some people pay £5, £10, £30, and depending on what you pay is what you give them. I didn't like that system. Didn't attract me because I didn't like the idea of one person getting something that another person couldn't. To me, all fans are equal, and everyone should be able to get everything. I have like my own personal libraries of songs and footage and photographs that have never been released, and so I had something that I thought people may be interested in, and they would want to pay that little bit extra to be able to hear unreleased Skin songs, or unreleased Red, White and Blue songs, or songs that I've written with Phil Mogg, or things like that. And so that's what people get when they join my Patreon site. It's you just have to factor it into your day that you have to create a lot of content and continually make content to keep people on board. That's and some people dedicate all of their music activity to that and bypass everything else. So you only get to listen to an artist's work via Patreon. I try to balance it all because I realize that's not everyone has the resources to be able to do that. So it's a tough one to gauge, and I think Patreon is something that will work for some people and not for others.
How much content are you putting up on that, Mike? Is it daily, weekly, monthly?
When I started, I had the intention of doing it every single day, and I did. But then it becomes very hard to sustain. So then I limited it to two things a week, but worthwhile things. And then I always make sure that I try to make sure that the people on Patreon get first view of videos. They get first view of artwork, things like that. So they just, they're getting exclusive content and exclusives. Yeah.
It's kind of the way I explain it to people that's asked me about it is, I said, I'm old enough to have been a member of the Kiss fan club and people like that. And but the difference was then you paid X amount per year, and every 3 months you got an envelope through the door that had photos or
Yeah.
had something or a single that they brought out, a recording that you got as a member of the fan club. But that's just an electronic version of it, and you can do it more often.
Exactly.
And it really is an old idea, just
Yeah.
rehashed, but I think it's really important. So
yeah, it's just like it's considered like an electronic fan club.
yeah, that's cool. The final thing I want to talk to you about, or we want to talk to you about, is Shades of Grey, because that's the thing you're working on just now. So can you talk us through the short, medium, long-term plans about what you're currently doing with Shades of Grey, and if there's anything else that you're doing musically that we should know about, or you can even tell us about?
Shades of Grey literally came about because I'd worked with an artist writing songs for them for a long period of time. And then the energy levels were just getting lower and lower and lower. And I'm not somebody who sits around waiting for other people to get their stuff together. I've always been the person who's created bands and been the driving force. So it just came out of, well, I'm bored. I need to do something. So I wrote this song called I Get Up, and I recorded it in my studio. And it was the first song that I had ever sung myself. Now it came about, when I was recording my instrumental album, I did one song on it, which had Lorraine Crosby sing. It was a song called Take Me Home. And when I was recording it, I did a guide vocal. And the person who was helping me get the drum sounds that day was a guy called Pete Newday, who is a producer in his own right. And he went, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize you had such a good voice." And it was the first compliment I've ever heard anyone say about my voice. You know, I've always been reluctant to step up to the mic because I had Neville McDonald standing there, or I had, Mattia Alfonsetti, and their voices were so great that I always felt a little bit reluctant to sing. So when I decided that I was going to record my own song, because Pete was the only person who said anything complimentary, I contacted him and I said, "Would you be interested in helping me with this, with the drums and mixing it and some BVs?" And he said, "Yeah, of course, love to do it." So we did the one song and released it, thinking that no one would want to listen to it or anything. And to my huge surprise, it got picked up by Planet Rock and it became playlisted. And the video got released to it, and I even disguised myself in the video because I just thought people, it would just hide who I am. That was like the idea behind it initially, and then of course it all caught on, and the pleasure that it gave me and the control that it gave me, because I was no longer waiting around for a singer deciding that they wanted to sing today. I could just do it all myself. I then decided, well, okay, I'll make a whole album. And then through the course of the year, I've just been working on it systematically, one song at a time. I'm now on song 8. Once I've done 10, then we'll release it as an album. But what I did in order to do this is I made it available as a pre-order, and my fan base, they've pre-ordered the album, and we've sold over 500 copies now. And of course that's generated the capital in order to make the videos, make the artwork, pay for the recording and all that sort of stuff. So the funds have done what a record company normally do, which is give you the advance money, but of course you keep the rights to your music. And that's how Shades of Grey came about. The idea of Shades of Grey is I've always been very influenced by glam music, whether it be Sweet, Alice Cooper, Kiss, Wasp, Twisted Sister, Motley Crue, Kiss. I've always loved those kind of larger than life bands. Don't get me wrong, I love all the other stuff too, but I've always loved the theatre and drama of those bands. And Shades of Grey was my opportunity to put all those kind of influences, which I have never been able to put into Skin or Red, White and Blues or Jagged Edge, because the singers, they weren't into that sort of stuff. And it's not the songs that they wanted to sing. You know, if I came in with Animal Fuck Like a Beast to Neville McDonald, he's not likely to want to sing it. You
I'd
know,
like to hear that. I would have
Yeah.
loved to hear that.
exactly. But I kind of love those 3-minute pop rock songs.
Yeah.
I've always been attracted to that stuff, and that's what Shades of Grey is. I sort of draw from all of those influences I've had to keep tucked away for 30 years.
So can you see it going on, or do you think you'll then get involved in creating another band in the more traditional sense?
I mean, I've said on numerous occasions that this would probably be the last record I make for some time. You know, I've devoted like a large chunk of my life to music. It's particularly, I mean, this record from beginning to end will probably be about 18 months. The only reason I've been able to do it, obviously, is because of the current COVID situation, you know, and we all have to make a living. I think what happened with Brexit is going to have a huge influence on bands touring in the future. And it's just about how sustainable is it for a musician anymore. And so I kind of look upon Shades of Grey as me saying thank you to my fans for 30 years of support. And if I can get that one thing finished and my fans are happy that I've given them a farewell record, then that's everything I really wanted to achieve. If I do a few shows to back it up, will very much depend on whether people are interested. But I'm not sure how sustainable it is for me as a musician anymore. And, you know, I struggle. I don't even have a band to maintain. I have my own studio, and I'm very, very self-contained. I don't know how young bands, I would hate to, you know, starting up Skin now, as like in my mid-20s. I just don't know how it would be done now. I think the way that people consume music is different now. People don't buy music anymore. They expect it for free. And musicians have to change how they get their music out there. So it's challenging times. I'm sure I'll make music, but I just don't know how.
No, that's fair enough. That's a fair comment. Yeah.
I think that wraps it up quite nicely, to be perfectly honest, Myke. However, as always, on the Scouser and the Scot, we do always ask for a few last little things, as always. Can you give us your links to your pages? Anything that we need to check out?
Yeah, I mean, my website is www.mykegray.com. MykeGray.rocks. That's where all of my merchandise is sold, T-shirts and CDs and downloads. That's the big one. But I don't know what I would do about Facebook. I mean, literally, Facebook is the platform which everything kind of gets built off of. So I do rely upon very heavily Facebook and Facebook followers and fans. I have 3 pages. There's a Shades of Grey page, there's a Myke Gray musician page, and then there's just my regular Myke Gray personal page. But that's where most of my interaction is done. I don't know what I would do about it.
What I'll do is I'll put it all down there. So guys, if you want to know more about Myke, please click on the links below. Check his pages out, check his music out. It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely wonderful to speak to you today, Myke. Really appreciate you giving us the time. Can't thank you enough, mate. So thank you very much.
I hope I've made it interesting enough, and I hope people will enjoy it.
I'm sure they will.
I guarantee you will. I'm sure they will, mate. Like I say, can't thank you enough. It's been a great talking to you. John, over to you, mate.
Well, that's it. That's another exciting episode of the Scouser and the Scot. You know what to do. Until next time, hit that cowbell and subscribe.